Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a story where the fate of an entire population literally hangs in the balance. But here's the crazy part. The turning point isn't a massive battle or some epic showdown. It's actually something incredibly small, totally ordinary, and profoundly ironic. So if you're fascinated by how history can completely pivot on the tiniest of details, you are absolutely going to love discovering this with me. Let's dive in.
Seriously, how does one guy's insomnia completely change the fate of an entire nation? Because the most pivotal chapter in this history, Esther chapter 6, doesn't feature a single supernatural miracle. In fact, in the original text of this entire book, the name of God isn't even mentioned once, not a single time. Instead, what we get is this string of seemingly impossible coincidences that totally shatter a massive dark conspiracy.
So let's get into Part 1, the turning point, and its fascinating chiastic structure.
To really understand the weight of this turning point, we've got to look at the narrative architecture. The first 5 chapters build up this immense, suffocating tension. They set up an extreme crisis where the clock is literally ticking down. In the dead of night, our antagonist Haman, who is basically the second in command of the entire Persian Empire, is out in his courtyard constructing a towering 23-meter execution pole. His grand plan? To march in at dawn and ask the king to execute his nemesis Mordecai, right before the morning banquet. The decree to wipe out Mordecai's people has already been signed, so the crisis is at its absolute peak.
Moving right along to Part 2, a sleepless night and the king's insomnia. Let's shift our focus right into the royal bedchamber. King Ahasuerus experiences a sudden, seemingly mundane issue. He can't sleep. But notice how these 3 micro details absolutely mathematically defy probability. First, in the original Hebrew, it literally says his sleep fled from him. So, just to pass the time, he asks for the empire's historical chronicles, ancient tax records and legal decrees, basically the ultimate cure for insomnia. Yet a servant randomly pulls one specific scroll out of thousands. And when he opens it up, he doesn't just read from anywhere. His eyes fall on the exact entry from years ago where Mordecai exposed an assassination plot and saved the king's life. It strongly suggests an unseen hand performing precise surgical interventions in history.
And that brings us to the number 5. Exactly 5 years. For 5 whole years, Mordecai sat at the city gate, entirely unrewarded for saving the king's life. Now, in the ancient Persian Empire, a king survived by ensuring absolute loyalty. Leaving that kind of loyalty unrewarded, that was considered a fatal political crisis, a huge scandal that demanded immediate correction. You can practically feel the king suddenly realizing his entire political foundation is acutely vulnerable.
Which leads us perfectly into Part 3, fatal misalignment, arrogance, and irony.
Desperate to fix this massive oversight, the king looks out to the courtyard. And the crucial point here is the sheer dramatic irony of this exact moment. The king asks who's outside, and it just so happens to be Haman, who has rushed to the palace at the break of dawn. These 2 men meet with completely opposite agendas regarding the exact same person. The king wants to use his supreme power to elevate Mordecai, while Haman wants to use his delegated power to hang him from a 23-meter pole. So the king poses a vague, abstract question. He asks, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Notice he doesn't name Mordecai. And this right here is where Haman's narcissistic internal monologue just totally takes over. He thinks to himself, whom would the king delight to honor more than myself? Haman had just been promoted. He was the only guest invited to the queen's banquet. He is utterly blinded by an echo chamber of his own greatness. Because Haman fully believes the king is talking about him, he lays out this escalating wish list. And notice what he doesn't ask for. He doesn't ask for gold or silver or more land. Nope. Step 1, he wants the king's royal robe, a literal symbol of the king's presence and authority. Step 2, he wants the king's specially crested royal horse. And step 3, he wants a massive public parade. Haman reveals a deeply dangerous subconscious desire here. He wants to experience absolute royal power. He essentially wants to be the king, which crosses a massive political red line.
All right, buckle up, because here is Part 4, the ultimate reversal, where the trap is finally sprung.
This brings us to the absolute climax of the narrative. The very second the trap Haman blindly built for himself snaps shut. The king responds with this devastating command. He says, "Go quickly. Do so for Mordecai the Jew who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing you have mentioned." Wow. With a single, irreversible command, the king forces Haman to become the architect of his own worst enemy's exaltation. And note how specific the king is. He explicitly names Mordecai's ethnicity, the very people Haman had just decreed to be annihilated. The psychological blow here is just staggering.
If you've ever wondered what the textbook definition of peripeteia is, well, this is it. A sudden and dramatic reversal of fortune. Haman's grand wish list instantly becomes his own customized punishment. He's forced to act as a lowly stable boy. He has to dress Mordecai in the royal robes, lead him on the royal horse through the city square, and publicly declare the king's favor. It's a total, public destruction of Haman's political credibility. Everyone in the empire now sees that Haman's power is incredibly fragile compared to the unseen forces protecting Mordecai.
And the contrast in the immediate aftermath is just brilliant. Think about it. Haman, who is driven purely by his ego, covers his head in shame, which was a symbol of deep mourning in the ancient Middle East, and flees home like a beaten dog. He completely collapses. But Mordecai? Entirely different. He doesn't glow. He doesn't use his new status to attack Haman. He just calmly removes the royal robes and goes right back to his humble post at the king's gate. Mordecai possesses true spiritual resilience, completely unaffected by sudden, incredible success, because his faith is grounded. It's not tied to his circumstances.
When Haman rushes home in total despair, his own wife and his trusted advisors, the exact same people who told him to build the execution pole the night before, deliver this chilling, prophetic realization. They look at this string of impossible coincidences and recognize a secular truth. A massive, unstoppable historical judgment has just begun. They flat out tell him, if Mordecai is of Jewish descent, you cannot stand against him, you will surely fall before him. They realize there's a higher power backing Mordecai that human politics simply cannot defeat.
So as the king's eunuchs arrive to drag Haman away, let's step back for part 5, the hand behind the curtain and unseeing providence.
Right as his advisors are speaking, the eunuchs arrive to drag a terrified Haman to the final banquet. But before we finish up here, we really have to look at the macro lessons hidden in the architecture of this text. The primary takeaway of this whole explainer is that ultimate power often operates quietly right in the mundane, microscopic details of daily life, even when it feels completely hidden. Sometimes we expect these massive, supernatural, booming interventions to solve our crises, right? But this text argues that an unseen hand is often working meticulously through a misplaced file, a chance encounter in a courtyard, or simply a night where sleep decides to flee. Hidden absolutely does not mean absent.
Furthermore, there are some massive modern lessons for us here regarding arrogance. Haman's downfall provides a fascinating psychological mirror. Pride literally precedes a massive fall. Worldly success can so easily isolate us into an echo chamber where we start to believe the whole world must revolve around our own greatness. The moment we start thinking, who else but me deserves this honor, we step right into a fatal self-made trap. Haman ultimately destroyed himself long before the king ever gave the final order.
But on the flip side, we have this profound truth demonstrated by Mordecai. Surviving the test of success and praise is often harder than surviving the test of suffering. When you are suddenly elevated, can you take off the royal robes and quietly go back to your day job? Mordecai reminds us that true strength is knowing that the glory doesn't fundamentally belong to us, and that allows us to return to our duties without losing our minds to vanity.
So I'll leave you with this. Could your own seemingly random coincidences, the frustrating delays, the closed doors, or even the sleepless nights, actually be a precise, unseen providence setting you up for a reversal you can't even fathom yet? Think about that as you face your own challenges today. Keep looking for those unseen hands shaping your own story. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.